So I remember the first memory. I mean, when you're going to Africa, you think, all it is huts and people living in the jungle or whatever you seem to think you see on National Geographic. But you actually get there and the airport's actually pretty nice. They built a nice new airport, so you get there and you're a little surprised to see that they have a lot of the amenities that we have in the U.S. So the city is actually pretty large. The Harare, the capital. So you get there and you start to realize there's a lot of similarities than you might have thought about Africa beforehand. The British established Zimbabwe, so they did a really good job of establishing their infrastructures of sewer systems and transportation areas. So the cities are laid out pretty well because of the British. Where other parts of Africa it's different because they didn't have the settlement of the British that did so well on mapping out a city. So you'll start to see it actually is pretty, normal looking. You'll start to, in Zimbabwe and in Africa in general, you have basically two classes of people. The upper class live in neighborhoods that they call low density. Those houses are usually about ½ acre to an acre, sometimes larger. They have what they call Dura walls. They're about, 8 to 12 feet high. So you find that a lot in most third world countries have similar circumstances. And then the high density areas are where the low income people, which is a majority, probably I think 90% of the people live in the high density. And those are called townships. And the townships were established as well by the British to help with this. They had the segregation of the blacks from the whites, whereas now that's all mixed in. So you have blacks now living in the low density because most of the whites have left Zimbabwe. But that's something you'll notice real quick is that the low density neighborhoods, it's kind of like you're in a home, anywhere else in the world. It's a suburban area. But the high density areas are very different because, you're living in places with tin roofs, even asbestos roofs. There's usually not, in these high density areas, there's usually not anything between you and the rafters. So it's just an empty room. There's not a ceiling. It's usually just made out of brick. They don't build their houses out of wood. So then the yards are very unkept. They're usually dirt. No one has grass unless it's in those high income areas. So yeah, that's the first thing you kind of notice is start to say, all right, what's the differences? The class differences is huge for you. The other thing was the first time that I usually travel in what they call commuter buses. And it's about the size of a Toyota minivan, one of the older, more square bread box type looking minivans. They usually put 3 people on the front, or 2 people in the front next to the driver. So there's 3 in the front, and then you usually have 4 to 5 rows of seats, and they put 4 people in each seat. So driving becomes very different because you're in a very cramped, condensed area. And it doesn't matter how big the people are, they still have to fit 4 people on a row. So you get used to being crunched, especially if you're a larger size, like I'm 6'5", so it was really hard for me to ride in those smaller buses. So it was the first times I went into downtown, not in the mission office and not with lots of elders at the mission home, as I actually went into the downtown urban area where the capital was. The first thing that shocked me was the fact that you look into the sea of people that's downtown, and for the first time you don't see anybody of a Latino descent, you don't see any Caucasian people. It's straight African people living is what you should expect, but it kind of caught me off guard to see all African people and not see a single white person. So that was a little bit shocking for me, but luckily didn't take too long to get over that. The most important thing for you to do is, especially for Americans going to Zimbabwe or Americans going to any other foreign country, is to realize America is America and the other country, like Zimbabwe, is its own country. So the things that we do in America, we don't necessarily need to say that they're better, or America's run better, or that Americans are smarter, or everything's run better in America, because it kind of hurts feelings. So I've noticed amongst the missionaries coming in, including myself, if I sat there and tried to tell, oh, well, in America we do this, in America we do that, but it becomes almost prideful and boastful because, America is what it is, and people don't need to be told that their country is not as good as America. So I quickly noticed that they wanted to be proud of their country, and they don't need to be told that their country is not as good as the U.S. So I quickly learned that for me to touch hearts with the Zimbabweans was to love their country and respect their country, and to see the good things about their country and the good things about their culture and how unique their culture is, and start to learn about those things. And as soon as I started doing that in my first, few weeks, my heart started to change and started realizing, like, yeah, I'm not in the United States anymore, and that's going to be okay. And I'm in Zimbabwe, and that's a great thing because this is what I wanted. Ultimately, I wanted to go to a different country. I wanted to live around different people. I wanted to experience different things. And so really appreciate that experience like I talked about earlier. Appreciate that you get to serve the Lord in a place that you probably never imagined that you would go to. So that's kind of the first experiences I had, was just the difference of how the people broke out, how the communities are developed, the strong British influence. The British English that they speak is different. Their accents are very different. Even the first Sunday that I was at church, I sat there in sacrament meeting. I couldn't understand a single thing that they were saying. Maybe not a single, but I couldn't understand the talk that was being given. It was in English, but their accent was so thick. And then it's also mixed with British, so you have this British African accent, which, I couldn't understand my first week or two. So you'll start to realize that they talk differently. And my wife even made fun of me when I got home because I talked differently like them. So you'll notice the difference in the language. You will have a major shock if you go to a high-density area first, just because the living standards are much lower. But if you're lucky, you might go to a low-density area first where the higher living standards are there. It's more like a suburban neighborhood. So I noticed that a lot of missionaries that went to the high-density areas first usually had a little bit more of an adjustment time.